For my ecological issue mitigation video, I decided to focus on the invasive species of common buckthorn. I will be speaking about buckthorn in relation to Duluth, Minnesota, which is my hometown, and it is located in the northern part of Minnesota, and it is on the tip of one of the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, which is the body of water seen in this photo. So, to begin, the common buckthorn, otherwise known as Rhamnus cathartica, is originally native to Eurasia. It was brought to the United States in the mid-1800s as an ornamental shrub that was used for living fence rows and wildlife habitat. Since its introduction, it has become aggressive and has slowly taken over most of the northeast and upper Midwest of the country. It is considered an invasive species. The term invasive species means it's an organism that causes ecological or economic harm in a new environment from which it's not native. In Minnesota specifically, it's found throughout the state, with the highest densities in forested and urban regions in the south half of the state. It's prevalent in disturbed areas around habitat edges such as roadsides and urban landscapes. The plant itself poses a serious threat to the degradation of native forest understory habitats. The plant contributes to forest erosion by shading out other plants that grow on the floor. It outcompetes native plants for nutrients, light, and moisture. It also serves as a host for mosaic virus, oat crown rust, and soybean aphid. According to the Department of Natural Resources, the common buckthorn is currently listed as a restricted, noxious weed in Minnesota. Such plants are detrimental to human or animal health and the environment. To prevent the spread of the plant, importation, sale, and transportation is prohibited throughout the state. The plant outcompetes several species, including the nannyberry, dogwood, and chokecherry. As far as its appearance, the common buckthorn grows as an understory shrub or a small tree that stands about 10 to 25 feet tall, with a trunk that's up to about 10 inches in diameter. The leaves are alternating, dark green, and have smooth margins. As you can see here in this picture, there's also the glossy buckthorn, which is a similar species, but for this purpose of this project, we are focusing on the common buckthorn. The bark is brown with a distinct orange inside, and in addition, the plant also has small, green-yellow, four-petaled flowers. Buckthorn has an advantage over the native plants because it has no known natural controls, such as insects or disease, that would naturally diminish its population. The feature of most concern, however, would have to be the fruits. Though only on the female plants, the common buckthorn bears abundant small round fruit with very high germination rates. The fruit are believed to contain amodin, which is a poisonous chemical compound known to naturally poison soil and water for developing frogs and salamanders and inhibit the growth of other plants. Unfortunately, the fruits are very attractive to birds and small mammals, which only increases their potential for widespread dispersal and complicates the possibility of eradication. Control of the plant is an ongoing battle. There are several mechanical, chemical, and biological tactics being used, but the success of each strategy really depends on the specific location and status of the buckthorn in that area. The primary goal for control is to prevent seed production and dispersal. The mechanical tactics include hand pulling, burning, and cutting/mowing. If the plant is young, the seedlings should be pulled pretty easily, especially if the soil is moist and there is not too many plants around it. Controlled burning, though it can be successful, is not always the most efficient, as buckthorn seedlings tend to grow better on recently disturbed bare soils. The other method, cutting/mowing, works ideally if the plant is young, as cutting or mowing mature plants can stimulate resprouting unless it is treated with herbicide. Which brings us to the chemical strategies. The most effective is the use of herbicide. However, care should be taken when dealing with chemicals. One needs to consider how far the target location is from water or wetland, and if the substance will harm non-target species as well. As we've learned earlier in the class, runoff from agricultural lands and anything you put in the soil and the ground ultimately runs back into the waterways and will return to the water cycle, which can be detrimental to the whole ecosystem. A specific herbicide, for example, tricloper, is effective in controlling broadleaf plants but does not kill grasses and can be safely used in wetlands or near water bodies. Though often overlooked, it's important to remember that everything put into the ground will somehow end up back in the water system, as previously stated. The use of herbicides, pesticides, and other plant chemicals can be extremely detrimental, not only to the environmental health, but also to human health, as humans also rely on the water sources for drinking and life. The last tactic is biological. This is not as common as the other two, but researchers from the University of Minnesota are working to find a buckthorn disease phytoplasma in the United States. It is referred to as the witch's broom's disease, as it causes clusters of thin twigs to arise from a single point on the stem. Currently, it's only in Europe where the plant is native, but possibly this disease could potentially be used in the United States to eradicate the species. One creative young man, however, from Cottage Grove, Minnesota, started a new form of buckthorn control. Matt Hamilton spent 3 years inventing buckthorn baggies with his father, John. The bags are dark garbage-type bags that inhibit sunlight penetration, which is necessary for buckthorn stumps. After cutting down the plants, the bags are placed over the stumps and starve it of sunlight, which inhibits it from growing back. The bags are cheap and reusable, and so far have been pretty successful. As a Duluth native, I was personally interested in the buckthorn species because in middle school I remember we would take nature walks in my natural science class in 7th grade, and we would take walks to the woods located behind my school. We were given these saws with our teacher's supervision, of course, and these really thick, big gloves that we would use to cut down the buckthorn and uproot them with our hands. I was aware that they were detrimental, but I didn't realize A, how stubborn they were to remove, to persist, to keep growing, and B, how much of an impact they had on the overall ecosystem. So I got in contact with one of my classmates that was in that same 7th grade class, and I was like, want to go on an adventure. So we returned back to our middle school, and I wanted to see what the status of the woods were behind the school and if the buckthorn was still there, if it was more prominent, if it had decreased. And what we found was in the space that the woods were several buildings. The biggest was a facility called Amber Wing, which is a mental care facility, and they are a pretty big building. They have a playground on the side, and then they also have a pretty large parking lot. So we concluded that much of the woods that we spent time in during those 7th grade nature trips have been cut down and lost to development. So we didn't go too much in depth into the woods because a lot of it, I think it now is private property. There were a lot of houses and backyards that were next to the actual facility. So unfortunately the woods do not exist anymore, or at least not as abundantly behind my school, but now I am cautious and more aware of buckthorn and its effects and what it looks like, and I'll keep that in mind for the future.